Well, everyone, time for part 2 of my Superman mini reviews. So, before I go any further, in my last video, I mentioned briefly that there are actually two different versions of Superman 2, and it's kind of interesting because the different versions of the movies are just completely different. Excuse me. The first version is, of course, the one that came out in theaters, which was directed by Richard Lester, who also directed Superman 3, and he also directed The Three Musketeers and its sequel, also in the 70s or something like that. So, yeah, and then there's, of course, the Richard Donner version, which has some things from the original theatrical version, but overall, it's just a completely different version of the movie. The main difference between the two is how General Zod and his minions escape from the Phantom Zone, which they got trapped in the first film. And so, in the Richard Lester version, the villains escape from the Phantom Zone via some kind of bomb that got put on the Eiffel Tower. And in the Richard Donner version, the villains escape from the Phantom Zone via one of the missiles that Superman pushed out into space in the first film. So that's pretty much the only main difference between the two versions. Of course, there are lots of other differences between the two versions, but I'm pretty much going to go off the original theatrical version. Even though I have seen the Richard Donner version, I much prefer that version over the original theatrical version of the movie. But oh well, what can I say? Sorry, I'm kind of tongue-tied right now. I don't know why, but oh well. So basically, overall plot of Superman 2 is that Superman has to fight off the villains from the Phantom Zone, General Zod and his two lackeys, I guess you could call them. And also in the movie, Clark Kent finally reveals his true identity to Lois, and it's actually kind of interesting. And also the two versions of the movie deal with that fact, deal with that whole thing near the end in very different ways. In the Richard Donner version, Superman actually does the whole spinning the earth backwards thing like he did in the first film, but in the theatrical version he does that whole mind-scrambling kiss thing, which is probably the most weirdest thing I've ever seen in a Superman movie. Besides the whole good evil Superman thing in Superman 3 and the whole nuclear man thing in Superman 4. But overall, whichever version of the movie you watch, Superman 2 is definitely a worthy sequel to the original. Like I said, if I had to choose between which version of the movie to watch, the Richard Donner cut is definitely the best version out there. But unfortunately, on this disc set right here, you only get the original theatrical version, which really sucks. I mean, you should have a choice as to which version of the movie you want to watch. I mean, like with the Alien Quadrilogy, you could choose to watch the original theatrical version or the extended cut. I mean, why can't more movies out there do that? I mean, why can't you have choices between the original theatrical version or maybe an extended cut? Or maybe a preferred version of the movie, which would be a version that, which would be a version of the movie that, the director prefers or something like that, But, overall, I really prefer the Richard Donner version. I have nothing against Richard Lester, of course. Excuse me. He brought some great ideas to 2 and 3, but overall, Richard Donner is an amazing director, and if he had stayed around, then Superman 2 would probably been done a little bit better, but oh well. But still, Superman 2 is definitely a great sequel no matter which version of the movie you watch. It's really great. I love it. It's definitely a worthy sequel to the original. And it's just one of those movies that you can't help but love. Like I said about Superman 1, it's a really great movie. And yeah, I mean, some comic book movies, when they make sequels, first sequel's probably going to be either good or even better than the original. Like with Batman, for example, I haven't seen the Tim Burton movies at all. I've only seen the Joel Schumacher Batman and Robin, and I thought it was pretty good, but once I get a chance to see the Tim Burton Batman movies, I'm probably going to change my mind. And of course, I have seen like bits and pieces of the Chris Nolan Batman movies, like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight and stuff like that. But overall, Superman 2 is just one of those sequels that is definitely really, really good, and it just blew me away. And I guess the only other example I can give is with the Iron Man movies. I saw Iron Man 1. I thought it was great. But of course, I never read any of the comics at all, and I thought it was really, really good. And when I saw the second one, I was like, okay, this is a great sequel. I love it. It's fantastic. It's great. I love it. But of course, I don't read any comic books at all, really. But it's nice that we get these movies out there that introduce us to these characters, and even if you don't read a comic book at all, you go to these comic book movies and you get introduced to the character, like who they are through, like the dialogue and all the little stuff that they do, and it's just really, really great. I mean, it's like the first movie. If you have a comic book superhero franchise, then the first one should be like an origin story to find out who the character is and stuff like that, and the motivations for that person becoming a superhero and stuff like that. In the sequels, you probably get like more insight into the character and more background information on who the character is and stuff like that, and also talk about the family situation and stuff like that. I mean, that's what you should do in sequels, and like also maybe the first or second film like start a little give the character like a romantic interest, or a love story or something like that. I mean, a lot of movies these days, they have like, superhero movies especially, they have like little romantic subplots. I mean, like, for instance, in Thor, the relationship between Thor and the Natalie Portman character, I thought that was really, really great. In Green Lantern, the little relationship between Ryan Reynolds' character, Hal Jordan, and Blake Lively's character, I thought that was great, I mean, it's nice that these movies have, like, romantic subplots that either were in the comic books or weren't in the comic books. I mean, but in all honesty, you have to stay true to the comic books in some fashion, like, movies that are based off of book series, like Harry Potter or Twilight, you gotta stay true to those books in some way or another. I mean, yeah, you can't stay like 100% true to the books, but you have to stay true to the books in some fashion, in some way or another, and that's pretty much also true for comic book movies, Gotta stay true to the comic books and stuff like that. So, yeah, but still, overall, Superman 2, definitely a worthy sequel to the original. It was really great. I don't have any complaints about it. I thought it was great. And also, like I said, whichever version of the movie you watch, whether it be the original theatrical version or the Richard Donner cut, it's just a really, really great movie, and it's just freaking fantastic. I love it. Definitely a great follow-up to the first film, and it's just a freaking fantastic movie. And it's really sad that the final two films weren't as good as the first two, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to Superman 3. So, anywho, that's all I have to say about Superman 2. Great movie, no matter which version you watch. It's just fantastic. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Talk to you guys later. Bye.